prison camp you escaped from at 71's a target area. Nobody knows that terrain better than you do. The risk factor is very high. You interested?
Yeah. Sir, do we get to win this time?
That's the question being asked by a lot of new Hollywood movies these days that are trying to provide a happy ending to the war in Vietnam. I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
I'm Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. 10 years later, the war that American soldiers couldn't win, or weren't allowed to win, some say, is being refought in the nation's movie theaters. And what do you know? We come off better this time. That's why we're calling this special edition of our show, This Time We Win. And Roger begins by examining the surprise hit film that started this trend.
The war in Vietnam seems to have taken its place in our national memory as unfinished business, and that's certainly true in Hollywood. 10 years after the American pullback from Vietnam, we're getting a lot of movies that want to go back and fight that war again, films that ask the question, in Sylvester Stallone's words, this time do we get to win? The first of those movies came out 2 years ago. It was called Uncommon Valor, and it starred Gene Hackman as a combat veteran who assembled a group of mercenaries to go back to Vietnam and rescue some American prisoners of war, including Hackman's own son.
I've checked all the cells. There's no sign of number 4. Where's the other American?
You have.
What?
I don't
What's
care
he
here,
saying?
Mike.
In the pit!
What?
The pit!
The pit? Where's the pit? The tower! The
I don't
floor's
care
down!
here.
Johnson! No! You give me a count of 60, then you go! No, sir! We can't leave anybody behind this time!
We can't leave anyone behind this time. Those words in one form or another are spoken in all of the new Vietnam War films, and all of these films seem based on the same crucial plot assumption, that there are still American prisoners of war in Southeast Asia, that they are being forced to work as slave labor in communist work camps, and that since the government in Washington has abandoned them, it's up to individual patriots to go in and bring them back alive. These movies all have one other thing in common, too. This time we win. Americans kill countless hundreds of Asians, and the message of the fighting men who are heroes in these films seemed to be, we could have won the first time if the politicians had let it.
And all those protesters, too.
Right.
Well, here it is again. We've talked about it before. The issue of how films follow what's going on in society. Now, you have a lot of protests in the 70s, and so we have a lot of Vietnam films that are, in effect, protesting the war and knocking the war. We'll get to those a little later in this show. Then we have a strong president who comes back, patriotic president. So now we're going to rally the flag again, and we're going to, in a movie sequel, if you will, a sequel to all the negative films, now here come the positive films, and a sequel to all the negative presidents, if you will, now we have a positive president. And here is the filmmakers in Hollywood. They have their finger on the pulse of the public, and they're giving them the films now, the rallying kind of film.
You know, when I was growing up, we were taught in school, I'm sure you were too, you know, America is the country that has never lost a war. Well, finally, a war came along that you sure can't say that we won it. But what's interesting is, if you look at these films and then talk to some of the kids who go to see them, and oftentimes the audiences are under 25 and weren't even around for the Vietnam War, they seem to feel either that we didn't lose or they're not quite sure what happened then. They just know that we're going to go back in now and fight this war. It's as if the war is really going on. There's a mythology.
Right.
Gee, there are lots of Americans over there. The communists have them all locked up. We're going to go over and bring them out, as if this is being taken as factual instead of part of a Hollywood fiction.
Well, and there's one more point to be made, and that is that the people who are making these films have identified a very large population, a frustrated population, and that is all of the people who served in Vietnam,
That's right.
who didn't have a victory parade, as we all know, when they came back, and this is their victory parade on film. I'm sure that there are veterans who are watching there, and some at least saying, good, I want to see those people die.
Apparently that was a large part of the audience for Uncommon Valor.
Yes.
Gene Hackman had another war movie out at about the same time called Under Fire.
Right.
It was kind of a liberal, South American,
Right.
what are we doing down here type
Right.
of war movie.
Right.
As a film,
Much
it was
better.
much better than
Much
Uncommon
better.
Valor. Nobody wanted to see that about how America's doing
Yes.
the wrong thing in Nicaragua. They wanted to see how we're doing. Gene Hackman is doing the right thing in Vietnam.
You got it. Coming up next at the movies, we're going to step back and look at the way the Vietnam War was treated differently just a few short years ago when gung-ho was not in fashion. Creating a rousing film about Vietnam or its veterans was unthinkable. Patriotism was out of fashion in the country, and the people who decide which movies get made didn't think such a film would be plausible. After all, John Wayne's The Green Berets in 1968 was not a particularly successful film, and more than that, it had been sort of scorned at, so why make one like that, people thought. Instead, in the late 70s, we got one angry Vietnam film after another, many quite excellent, depicting the war with all of its mind-boggling horror and waste. And one of the greatest scenes in any of these films is in Francis Coppola's Apocalypse Now, when late in the film, Martin Sheen's crew stops a Vietnamese boat they suspect might be hiding the enemy.
What's in that vegetable basket? Come on, get out of here. Come on. Get over here. Sheriff, check that vegetable basket. All right. Shut up, Slow. There ain't nothing in here. What's in the boxes? Look in the tin can. That rusty can. Right, that's all. There ain't nothing on it. Yellow can. Check the yellow can. She was sitting on it. What's in it?
Why don't we kill them all? The rage and frustration that Frederick Forrest unleashes there is just as heartfelt as the rage in the current Vietnam films. This time we win. Now, to just show you how different the Vietnam veteran was treated in films less than a decade ago, here's William Devane in Rolling Thunder, another underrated film, and see how differently he reacts to this situation of being abused than, say, Sylvester Stallone would, or Gene Hackman.
Don't give me any of that Officer Hart. Because I was right there in Nam with the rest of you, except I was laying face down in the mud while you cats was flying over.
Come on. Now, what do you got to say?
Wayne. Major Charles W. 396, 84, 69.
He's a rough old boy, ain't he? This dude's crazy. He ain't gonna do too well in the information department.
Finally, one more powerful image from the Vietnam War films, the old style. Here's crippled veteran John Voight's speech to college students at the end of Coming Home.
And now I'm here to tell you that I have killed for my country or whatever. And I don't feel good about it. Because there's not enough reason, man. To feel a person die in your hands or to see your best buddy get blown away. I'm here to tell you, it's a lousy thing, man. I don't see any reason for it.
Now, the message of that speech is so different from what we're getting now. John Voight saying, in effect, this time we lost, and we deserve to, and we better figure out why so we can be a better nation. It just seems so long ago when you see these films compared to what we're getting now.
It's like more than a generation ago. You know, looking at these films again, I was reminded of how different they are from the war film genre that Hollywood created. The First World War, all of those Second World War films with John Wayne and Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas in it, in which it was assumed that we were the good guys. That was never questioned. It was never explained. We went out there. It was our job to fight the enemy and to kill them. And in these films, look how much introspection, how much doubt, how much self-questioning there is. It's a totally different feeling. And now, 10 years later, we're getting the traditional war films about Vietnam.
And I want to tell you something. There's the same jingoism, and some people will say, if you study these simply from a visual strategy point of view, the same kind of racism. And I mean it this way, that the Americans all have distinct personalities, and the enemy all is another color.
Absolutely.
I have seen in one of these films, and I think it was the original Missing in Action film, which we're going to take a look later, I saw that it reminded me so much of a World War II film, because you know what we had a shot of the enemy? We had a shot of the helmets, and they were different shaped helmets, like the old films, the World War II films with the Germans, always different shaped helmets, and we didn't get a lot of shots of their faces, so it is just monolithic enemy.
Yeah, and then you have to ask, why are they wearing helmets? The war's been over for 10 years. Nobody's shooting at them. Why don't they just wear little caps? Not right, because it doesn't fit with the war film.
That's right, because the war is still on, and this time we win.
Next at the movies, karate champion Chuck Norris, you just mentioned it, he returns to Vietnam to bring back some of his buddies. In this country, and as they protested that they shouldn't be unpopular just because they risked their lives in an unpopular war that we sent them to fight, movie makers began to listen to that argument. One of the first was Chuck Norris, a veteran of half a dozen fairly good karate movies. In a 1984 film named Missing in Action, Norris followed close on the heels of Gene Hackman's Uncommon Valor, and he, too, started out with the assumption that there were still American POWs alive in Southeast Asia. He played a Vietnam vet who had been in one of those post-war Vietnam prison camps. He had escaped, and then in this scene, he's returned to help his fellow Americans who at first don't understand who he is.
You guys are going home.
We're going home?
Damn right.
Going home.
Missing in Action was an enormous hit at the box office, and what was impressive to Hollywood was that a lot of teenagers who hardly remembered the Vietnam War were turned on by the strongly pro-American message and by the basic war action scenes in the movie. So, Norris made another movie, Missing in Action Part 2, The Beginning, which told about what happened before the first movie when his character escaped from that POW camp in the first place.
Colonel Yen, for the atrocities inflicted on the Vietnamese and American prisoners of this camp, I sentence you to death.
Now, the key thing I noticed there was that that bad guy doesn't seem inspired by images of actual North Vietnamese enemies, but by movie images. Specifically, he seems to be ripped off from the character of the Japanese camp commandant in Bridge on the River Kwai. And the action in this movie is also borrowed from the great tradition of Hollywood war movies. It's straightforward, gung-ho, traditional Hollywood war genre stuff. It doesn't have anything to do, really, with Vietnam.
No. I have a way of looking at these two kinds of films. We looked at the so-called negative films from the 70s, Coming Home, Deer Hunter would be another one that we didn't talk about, and these films. And you know what the difference really is? And this is sort of sad. The earlier films, you would see them, you would not want to fight a war. These new ones, you want to fight a war. These films make war glamorous. These films make you want to enlist and fight and kill some people. Those other films make you want to not fight. Very big distinction. And I wonder if we're coming around. I know I'm right on that one.
That's an interesting point. I wonder what a Vietnam veteran would say about that, because I don't think very many of them that I've met really necessarily enjoyed fighting the war. But now what they're looking for, and what these films are picking up on, I think, is also not just what you said, that the war looked like fun to fight, but also, hey, what about some recognition for us? We risked our lives, we were out there in the jungle, we got shot at, our buddies got killed, and now we come back and America wants to forget all about it, which is really the RAMBO.
Okay, now that's a legitimate point to make to those people. But when you talk about teenagers, you see, that's what they're going to see. They're going to say, hey, war, it's fun.
Gee, I'm sorry
I want to go kill some of those kids.
I missed that war.
Exactly. Coming up next at the movies, we take a look at the most popular gung-ho Vietnam veteran now, Sylvester Stallone's John Rambo.
You're the one who's making the mistake.
Yeah, what mistake?
Rambo.
During our survey of the new This Time We Win Vietnam films, the biggest hit of all, Sylvester Stallone, is Vietnam veteran John Rambo, who really flies off the handle when he's harassed in a western town that he's passing through in the movie First Blood. He goes nuts in that town, killing the police, destroying the town, and even a visit from his old commander can't stem his rage.
It's over, Johnny. It's over!
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off! It wasn't my war. You asked me, I didn't ask you. And I did what I had to do to win, but somebody wouldn't let us win. Then I come back to the world, and I see all those maggots at the airport protesting me, spitting, calling me baby killer and all kinds of vile crap. Who are they to protest me, huh? Who are they? Unless they've been me and been there and know what the hell they're yelling about.
It was a bad time for everyone, Rambo. It's all in the past now.
For you! For me, civilian life is nothing. In the field, we had a code of honor. You watch my back, I watch yours. Back here, there's nothing.
You're the last of an elite group. Don't end it like this.
Back there, I could fly a gunship. I could drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here, I can't even hold a job. Fucking guys! Ah!
Now, at the end of First Blood, John Rambo is sent to prison, quite reasonably. Given the number of people he's killed, the amount of destruction in the land, you'd think he'd never get out. But there's no quicker way to get sprung from jail than if your movie's a hit. And so now we have Rambo First Blood Part 2, and John Rambo is sprung from jail and sent back to Vietnam to help recover, he's told, American soldiers still missing in action. And in this film, in a very cleanly written and powerful speech, Rambo explains to his commanders what he and his fellow veterans still want.
The war, everything that happened here may be wrong, but damn it, don't hate your country for it.
Hey, I die for it.
Then what is it you want?
I want what they want. And every other guy who came over here and spilt his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's what I want.
Now, politics aside, that's one heck of a speech, and it's probably the best moment in this predictable but very effective action picture. And you know, what's most incredible about all of these films, the ones that we lost the war in and the new ones now in which we win the war, what's amazing is that the war is still being fought on film. This war tore America apart, and now the films themselves seem to be choosing sides.
It's true, and you know, the Rambo pictures are far and away the biggest box office hits of all of these, and the first character since Rocky that Stallone has been able to play with a lot of box office success. I think it's because he, and he was the co-author of this screenplay, has a very, very clear idea of the wounds that still haven't healed. The hurt that we hear in that speech is very real, and it's out there, and people are reacting to it. And then you go to see the movie, and as we said when we reviewed the film, it's a good action picture. The politics are screwy, but that's not what people think when they see that. And even I, hearing that, I agree with that. That's a good point.
Oh, listen, I know how hot it is. I did a story on the Vietnam War films for my newspaper, and I had to go rent the films to play on a video cassette player. It was hard to find Apocalypse Now. These films are among the most rented films right now. All the 10th anniversary coverage and all the networks and all this is triggering the renting of these films. People are seeing these films all over again. This subject is not going to go away.
It's unfinished business. We don't feel that we've put the Vietnam War to rest. We put it on the front burner with all of the controversy in the 70s. Then we thought maybe it would go away, maybe it wouldn't be a film subject. Suddenly, it's hotter than ever before.
That's it. You got it. That's it for this week. Next time at the movies, we'll review Chevy Chase as a newspaper reporter named Fletch. Also, John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis in Perfect, the story of a Rolling Stone reporter who meets a very interesting aerobics instructor. And until then, we'll see you at the movies.